Hey, team players, and welcome back. Today, welcome to Local Football Flavor. We're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions, everything that's going on with them fantasy-wise and betting-wise. And it's been just a turbulent day in the Local Football Flavor recording studios right now. But it is great. We're here to talk Lions, and this is going to be amazing, Bob. So the one thing we want to start up front, what makes Local Football Flavor different than all of the other broadcasters out there, is the way that we do our projections and our information. We go off of the actual bets that are in the sports markets right now and use the markets data to give us the correct answers. Last year, we went 66 or 60% against the spread and over-unders, when the Hall of Fame number is 66%. That is remarkable. Our regulars who followed the show for fantasy football, all but 3 ended up winning their league championships. We are champion makers, and that's what we do here. And the Detroit Lions are a team that, quite frankly, they're expensive in fantasy drafts. I mean, Amaz going top round, Gibbs is going at the first turn. Where do we see values of looking at Detroit? Are they too expensive to play with? Are we better just passing and taking better value elsewhere? Where is the value that we're going to be able to make fantasy gold with Detroit?
The answer to that question is really nowhere.
The
Detroit Lions are a powerhouse team,
mm-hmm.
and in fantasy football, you want players on powerhouse teams. That is the long and short of it, is
mm-hmm.
that if a player is on a team that everybody is aware that is a consistent offense, that is a scoring offense, well, those players are going to conceivably be drafted higher than every other player.
Well, yeah.
There are really no question marks to the Detroit Lions this year. They have
mm-hmm.
been number 1 ranked in PFF offensive line. They have a defense that it will allow their offense to be on the field.
Mm-hmm.
They have a quarterback that is a veteran. They have a wide receiver that's been in the league for a couple years now who's going to be a star.
Amazing. Yeah.
Who's going to be a star if he's not already. You have 2 lightning and thunder running backs in Gibbs and Montgomery, and then you have a tight end who came out of the woodwork last year in Sam LaPorta.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, there are some question marks in terms of who's wide receiver 2, who's wide receiver 3. And that could come into play when you look at like a guy like Antoine Green or Khalif Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys aren't being drafted until the 17th, 18th round.
Yeah.
So when we look at Detroit, they profile as a team that if you want their players, other than Jared Goff, you are going to have to spend a premium on their players.
Are they going to be worth it?
And I think that they are, but I do think that we have to be cautiously optimistic depending on the format that we play in.
Okay.
So in a weekly winners type of contest, a guy like Amon-Ra is not a target for me
mm-hmm.
because he does have a pretty even keel throughout the season. He's not going to spike big 30-point weeks. He's not going to get you 6-point weeks. He's
mm-hmm.
going to be right around his average. And if you were to project,
which is great for a redraft league.
If you were to project Amon-Ra, so if you were to take Fantasy Pros' fantasy points projected
mm-hmm.
over the entire 17-game season, say he plays all 17 games, and he were to get the same points in every game,
mm-hmm.
it would project to around 14 points a game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be a top 5, top 6 wide receiver on a weekly basis in the NFL, you do want to project 15 to about 26 points a game, somewhere in that.
And that's half PPR.
Points, and that's half PPR. So does Amon-Ra, he definitely has the capability of doing that, but he has and we talked last week about this, one of the lowest coefficients, which means that he doesn't really stray far from his average. So it will be something to look at.
Definition of a steady Eddie. He's a high quality. This is my line. I'm going to be on it.
And if you are a player who is less risk averse and you are drafting in the top 6 of fantasy football drafts, if you don't get Christian McCaffrey,
mm-hmm.
he's kind of the guy you're looking at and saying, I think that there's a lot of value in him, because I do know that he's going to get hurt, but I do know when he plays, he's not going to go too low. He's going to be even keel for me. So even if
mm-hmm.
he tops off at 20, I still have a really good chance to win my week. Now, with Gibbs is going at the back half of the first round. And this is
mm-hmm.
like the first time we've seen 2 Detroit Lions players go in the first round of fantasy football drafts.
Forever.
Yeah. Maybe even like forever. Because Calvin Johnson was going high. And if you did fantasy drafts when Barry Sanders was around, he was going high too. But, having Jahmyr Gibbs there is that, people are saying that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be not a guy that you want because he's still in that platoon role. And typically speaking, you don't want a guy in a platoon role when you are looking at a first-round pick.
Yes.
But the thing about Jahmyr Gibbs is Jahmyr Gibbs offers you so much more difference than a guy like David Montgomery, where David Montgomery is capable of running the ball between the 20s, but he's the hammer. He's going to get you that 2-3 yards, whatever. And Gibbs is going to be the guy that comes on for passing plays, is going to run block if need to, or is going to pass block if need to. And he's a guy that could project really high. If you look at his projections over the totality of the year, Fantasy Pros is expecting that he's going to get 222 points. Now, in our rankings, based upon the betting markets, we have him ranked as around, I believe, our 5th best running back, and in the top 15, obviously, of players. So, and Amon-Ra as ranked as our number 2 wide receiver, I believe, in terms of value. But when you look at these two players, are they going to be great? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Amon-Ra has a little bit less risk because there is nobody really else in that wide receiver room other than Sam LaPorta. And when we look at Sam LaPorta, the thing about Sam LaPorta to be really nervous about is that those touchdowns came on a huge clip. I mean, you're having 2-3 touchdown games, totaling 10 touchdowns, but only getting around 800 yards. So the question is he going to command a bigger share of the target share when there's only 2 or 3 players in this room that are probably going to command a deal of the target
Absolutely.
share? And do you think he can get better than he did? So in order for Sam LaPorta to pay out at his value, which is around in the 3rd round, sometimes people will like to take him in the back half of the 2nd if they know they can't get him at the,
Sure. You're on the ends,
round. In order for Sam LaPorta to pay out value, he's going to have to turn out approximately an 1,100-yard year and probably between 8 to 10 touchdowns again. And he's already dealing with a little bit of an injury, but we don't write those camp injuries off so soon unless there's an injury history or it's a severe injury or something like that. So, for my money, they're all expensive, and there's no real, when we say value, there's no real
there's no sleeper that we're uncovering here.
You're drafting them at their value.
Yeah.
And will they pay out at their value? I think that Amon-Ra has the best chance to do that.
Sure.
With Gibbs coming in 2nd. And it's very well that Sam LaPorta can go beyond his value, being drafted in the 3rd round. But also you have to remember, if you're drafting a tight end that high, you're passing on other positional candidates that will fill out your roster. And do I think Sam LaPorta will put up an infinitely better season than George Kittle in round 5?
Yes.
Or Kyle Pitts in round 6 or 5? I don't know. I don't know if that season is there for me to want to take him. I'm tempted to take him in the 3rd round.
I think the answer is this, and this is what our ratings will reflect, is LaPorta's going to be the number 1 tight end. I mean, that's almost certainly guaranteed, and that includes a world where Kelsey still exists. So LaPorta's going to produce. But to your point, is this like going to be the Kelsey era before, where the gap between him and number 2 is just so massive that you can't look at it? And to your point, Bob, is the reality is probably not. Well, yes, he definitely will outscore Kittle. You see in the 5th round. Is it going to be that much to be more than the value for positional gain at the tight end slot? And sure, knowing that there's a complete tier at about the 5th or 6th tight end, do you want to be in that top one, which is the tier above that? Sure, there's value in that. But your total points produced from LaPorta in the 3rd round compared to another receiver in that neighborhood, it's not really there. I mean, you can go pick up a Moss like from the Cincinnati running back and probably get more points for the same 3rd round.
And here's the thing that I want to bring up, Joe, is that when we go back and we just look at the week to weeks from Fantasy Pros over the last several seasons, right? The monster seasons you're talking about, Travis Kelce in 2022, Mark Andrews in 2021, and Travis Kelce again in 2020. All of that time, those players eclipsed over 300 fantasy points. And that's in PPR. So it's going to be a little bit less in half PPR.
Sure.
But when we come down, so let's say we take Travis Kelce's 2022 season, that's 261 PPR points. even with that massive amount of touchdowns that Sam LaPorta had last year, he only had 196 points.
Yeah, so you're talking 100 points less.
So that's that when we and that's in half PPR. When we track it to PPR, he's at 239. So that in order to put up that, and we were
talking 11 more touchdowns he'd have to put up to make this worth it. That's value. Not realistic.
I'm not finding 40 more targets, 700 more yards, 600 more yards, and 4 more touchdowns. I'm not finding them. And so in order to invest in him that high, you need to see that value. And while I think he's going to still be tight end 1 overall,
he's just not worth the third round.
I think it's going to be close, because even in the year that he had last year, you got to consider this. Even in the year he had last year, starting off a little bit slower, right? He was only 9 points better than Evan Ingram.
Yeah.
And Evan Ingram didn't put up a fantastic season during certain games, but you have to put that in consideration. I'm not saying Evan Ingram's going to do that again, but what I am saying is that at positional value, third round is a nice return for a guy that's going to get 239 points, but
you should also be able to get people that are in the 250s and above in the third round, and that's ultimately why the net isn't there. Kelsey had the net value because he was so far ahead of the crowd, and you knew you were winning tight end.
300 points. You're going to draft him in the first round, second round.
Exactly, and you knew you were winning tight end by 6 points every week. You get LaPorta, there's going to be some weeks he doesn't even win the tight end battle, depending on who you're matched up against. And even if he does, you're not going to consistently get the blowouts the way that you did. So LaPorta, great player, just not worth the third round pick.
And to put this into a greater perspective, to a guy like Jordan Addison, who, when we were speaking about Minnesota, we had to take care of that. Only 221 points. When we looked at Jacoby Myers last year, 218 points, and we looked at Jane Reed, 217 points. He needs to elevate his game. Am I saying he can't do it? No. Am I saying that he could do it? Yes, but that means that Jared Goff is going to have to be lights out and find way more ways to get this guy involved in the game plan. And with the way that Jahmyr Gibbs works, with the way Amon-Ra works, I don't know, like I said, if those 40 more targets are going to be there in order for him to be able to put up Kelsey Andrews' past numbers.
And the joy that Detroit has going for them this year is when we look at all of the aggregate bets, we project them to score the second most points on the NFL fields this year. That's a ton of points that they're going to be scoring. And it really just comes down to the distributive amount. So, yes, there is an upside within in-game variations that LaPorta's ceiling, because he is a spike and floor guy, can really take you off. We love them in things that are best balls and things of that nature. But when we're talking about a pure redraft, a little bit less so. But now that we're diving into the conversation about Detroit and putting their points on the board, like we said, projecting to score the second most points this season at 25.9. We're projecting their defense, on the other hand, to be a little bit less than mid at 19th overall, which is a pretty beneficial thing when you look at Detroit overall. It means that from a fantasy perspective, they're going to have to keep scoring. So when we look and say, all right, they're going to keep scoring, they're worth investing in. There's a reason they're so expensive. Yeah. And when you look at how powerful this offense can be, Goff is going to be a big part of this. And Goff is a quarterback that we are not just poo-pooing because he doesn't run. He's going to put up points.
And to your point about Goff, and to my point about Sam LaPorta, is that Jared Goff had the second highest amount of attempts last year in his whole career at 605. Almost 4,500 yards. And like I said, if Sam LaPorta is going to elevate, that means that Sam LaPorta is going to get 200, 300, 400 more yards, which is going to mean that he has to get 20, 30, 40 more 30 more
targets. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So that means that Jared Goff is going to have a career season. And with the way that people are drafting where Jared Goff is going, if you think that, Jared Goff came out with 30 touchdowns last year, not even his highest total in touchdowns. But if you think that Jared Goff is going to be like, if you think that, I'm just saying, if Amon-Ra is a first round candidate, if Sam LaPorta is a third round candidate, Jared Goff going in the 12th round seems crazy,
right?
I'm not saying that he had, he will return some bum weeks because he does throw a lot of interceptions.
Yeah, sure. He's a high volatility guy as well. This is.
But he's maxed out. He's really maxed out. And he maxed out as QB7 last year in terms of Fantasy Pros total points. And when I look at that and I say he was QB7, if Sam LaPorta is going to elevate, if Amon-Ra is going to stay balanced, and if Jahmyr Gibbs is going to stay balanced, why aren't we ranking Jared Goff as the 5th?
That's
or the 4th.
And we have him ranked as a top 8.
But no, I'm saying the fantasy community.
Yeah, I know.
I'm saying
that's the value. That's the value in Detroit.
That if you think that Sam LaPorta is going to elevate, then doggone it, you got to take a guy like Jared Goff a little bit later in the draft because he's going to pay out. I mean, the guy's maxed out at 600 some career things. He's not going to have 700 attempts.
No.
So there's going to have to be a redistribution of targets somewhere in here. And who gets left out?
And the redistribution for LaPorta's case is that he didn't really turn on in week 1. He wasn't the LaPorta at the end of the year. He was at the beginning of the year. So there is some natural growth there. So it doesn't have to be all new development, but still there's a lot of good department. So we're going to be, if you are doing best ball leagues, getting Goff and stacking him with either LaPorta or Amon is an amazingly good strategy. And given how cheap you can get Goff at, it's actually worth taking, especially if you have like the 5th pick overall, taking LaPorta, and hopefully you can get him in your 3rd round. That's 100% worth it. And normally we're never that high on tight ends, but it's because it's a best ball format and you're going for those blow up weeks. So with that being said, Bob, let's talk about the win projections we have for the Detroit Lions. It is going to be high. You don't project to score the 2nd most points and not put up wins in this league. We have them projected between 11 and 12 wins, slightly towards 11. And because if you just watched the last episode, we had Green Bay between 10 and 11, leaning towards 11. This isn't as blowout of a division as some people are projecting it to be. Yeah, we have Detroit winning it, but we don't have them running away with it. We only have them as a 33% likelihood. Green Bay is at a 30%. The bet we recommend for those who are in the pride is to go with Detroit makes the playoffs. We basically do not see a scenario where Detroit does not make the playoffs. Like it is really hard to draw that narrative. Given the fact that they only play 2 games outside the entire year, this team is going to score. And they're going to score a lot.
Yeah.
That equals wins in this league, and that is what you want. So of all the team players who have watched all the way in, make sure you click subscribe. We'd love being with you. For those watching us live right now in the moment, we're about to tell you how to beat the underdog and how to win their weekly leagues. There's a massive cheat code that most people are not doing. We'll be doing it there. For the rest of you who watch us on Tuesdays, we're back with another division, breaking it down.